Gerry, could you tell us a little bit more about the, Standard Life and its involvement in the Chinese market?
Certainly. I'm chairman of Standard Life. Standard Life is one of the largest savings and investment businesses in the UK.
Sure.
I'm very pleased that we have a very successful business in China.
Yeah.
This is in partnership with Taida from Tianjin.
Yeah.
The company's name is Heng'an Standard Life.
Yeah.
And we now have branches in over 70 Chinese cities.
70 Chinese cities?
70 Chinese cities,
wow.
Which I think makes it one of the most sort of widely spread foreign companies in China.
Sure.
That's a great pleasure to me. I'm one of the very, very few foreigners who's been allowed to become chairman of their Chinese business.
Oh, really?
So as well as being chairman of a Fortune 500 company, I'm very proud to be chairman of my Chinese joint venture.
Yeah. And when did Standard Life establish its presence in China?
Well, we first established our presence in China over 150 years.
150 years?
150 years ago. But then, of course, things happened, the world moves on, and we exited China for a while. This present business was started about 10 years ago, which was when the insurance market in China was open up to foreign companies such as mine.
Wow, that's indeed very interesting. So what's like the key areas, Standard Life cover in Chinese market at this moment?
We are designing savings products and insurance products for Chinese families. This is a business very much aimed at Chinese customers. The thing that we've learned through our nearly 200 years around the world is unless you give things that the customers want, they won't buy them. Sometimes insurance doesn't have a very good reputation, so we're trying to make the customer the centre of our business in China by producing products for them which they can trust, which are reliable and which help them during their lives.
Could you maybe give us a few examples of the specific Chinese product you developed?
Well, for example, somebody may want to save for 10 years in order to save money for their children going to college. They may want to save to look after their healthcare requirements. They may want to save for their old age. Like in many places in the world, the China government can't do as much as it used to in this area. More responsibility goes back to the individual people, the individual citizens, and it's very important that they are well informed about what they can do, what the choices are, and that they buy products which are safe and which are right for them. So that really is our business in China.
You really know Chinese culture a lot, because in China we have the saying, we try to save every single penny for a rainy day.
Yes.
So issues like healthcare, education and pension are indeed very high on the agenda of pretty much every single family.
Yes. And the days of the iron rice bowl have gone. People have to look after themselves. That can be very good. It gives people more independence. It also can be scary for some people who are not used to this. Sometimes these products are very complicated. The company knows more about them than the customer does. So it's very important to make sure there's an equal balance between the customer and the company.
That's all very interesting. So as a chairman for such a prominent joint venture in China, do you have to travel to China a lot?
Yes, I think I went to China 15 times last year.
15 times last year?
Yes, but I've been going to China for over 20 years.
20 years.
I'm sure I've been to China 1,000 times. 1,000 times in that time, so I'm very, very familiar with China. I have many friends in China. I'm very, very familiar with China.
So what's your general impression about the change of China over the past 20 years?
I think it's been very impressive and very dramatic. I first went to China in 1992 at the invitation of Premier Zhu Rongji. And I was part of a small group working with the Development Research Centre of the State Council, planning how to reform Chinese state enterprises. So I stayed for 6 weeks in the state guest house in Beijing. We developed a program of reform, which we then presented to President Jiang Zemin at the end of it, and that became the program which underlay the Communist Party's reform program for state enterprises in 1993. So I feel in a small way I'm one of the godparents of the reform process in China. And I've always been very interested in this. I am very, very enthusiastic about what is happening now. Of course, one knows that China makes great progress. I think I look forward to the next 10 years with real excitement as to what might happen in China over that time.
Wow, it all sounds really, really, exciting. But we all know, in addition to the, position you have with Standard Life, you are also one of the most prominent leader in the UK financial sector as a chairman for the TheCityUK. So, sometimes people might get a little bit confused between the Lord Mayor of the City of London and the TheCityUK. So what's the difference between those two organizations?
Yes, certainly. Well, the TheCityUK is a practitioner body. All the financial service companies, all the professional service companies, the lawyers, the accountants, the management consultants, they're members of this body, and we're a body which seeks to represent the industry. I am very pleased that my other chairmen have chosen to be their spokesman. So I am the spokesperson for the financial services industry in the UK. Of course, the Lord Mayor has a very traditional, historic position. We work very closely with him. We help provide people to go with him. We think of ideas. But he is we are very much on the practical side. We are the practitioners, and the Lord Mayor is the guardian of our history and of our tradition in this area.
So what's like the overall, GDP your organization, the TheCityUK, represents?
Okay, well, the financial services are by far the largest portion of British GDP. Huge export industry. Financial services exports more than every other industry put together in the UK. So financial services are very, very important to the UK. Many millions of people work for them. And we're sitting here today in the City of London, which of course is it's Europeans' financial centre. This isn't just the UK financial services capital. This is Europe's financial service capital and one of the great financial service capitals of the world.
That's indeed, quite important. And so I know for the TheCityUK, probably they will have various strategy to try to engage, the Chinese investors or Chinese enterprise. Could you maybe give us a brief introduction about
certainly.
the kind of work?
Certainly. And because because London is so global, we have many Chinese banks, many Chinese companies here as well. And the great thing about the City of London is it doesn't matter where you are from, we all work together. And when we take delegations to other countries, all our members come on those delegations. So we are representing Chinese businesses, American businesses, as well as British businesses. China is a very important hub in terms of global financial services. England has a large economy, but it's small in relation to the Chinese economy. But there's certain matters here which, by working together with other practitioners, if you look out the window here, you'll see within a mile from here every type of financial services professional in the world. Give you an example that my son is a lawyer working for a British law firm. He does much work for a Chinese bank investing in Africa.
Oh, really?
Nothing at all to do with the UK, but a Chinese bank investing in Africa will often use British law, will often use British expertise. So Britain is sitting in a big spider web of relationships around the world. And in many ways that London is China's gateway to the world. Much business that China does elsewhere in the world, whether it's commodity trading, whether it's operating in Africa, whether it's operating around the world, some of that business comes through London. So we are providing a service to China in the same way as we provide a service to Germany, to the UK, to the rest of the world.
You actually remind me of, a point raised by Long Yongtu. He is one of the most prominent, ex-minister of the Chinese government who helped China successfully enter the World Trade Organization. And I remember the first time we met at, his lecture, he actually mentioned that it's quite important for UK and China business try to work closely together to expand, joint ventures in another overseas market.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And this is exactly what you have just described, especially in Africa and in ASEAN and many other emerging markets.
Yes, and this is happening all the time. So I very much welcome Chinese firms coming to London. We give them a huge welcome. I think banks like ICBC have a huge role to play in the London market. To show the importance of China to the UK, I think in the next 2 or 3 months I'm expecting the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, to go to China. I'm expecting Mayor Boris, the Mayor of London, to go to China. I'm even hoping that our Prime Minister might go to China. So there's a lot of two-way interest.
Of course. So is there like any specific support you could potentially provide for Chinese investors to come over to London, especially to UK, to explore joint venture or other opportunities?
Certainly, I can say without reservation, they would always get a great welcome if they came here. We are very happy to help them meet their counterparties, to meet practitioners, to make sure that they meet people who they can rely on. I'm very, very happy to drink a bottle of Baijiu or Maltai with them to make them feel at home, but really to make them feel welcome here, because this is a very easy city for people to live and to operate in.
And actually there has been some interesting research demonstrates, actually among all the many different destinations globally, London are increasingly become the most preferable ones for Chinese investors.
Yes. And you must know yourself, it is possible to live a completely Chinese life in London. Although I think it is a shame if people come to London and they don't also appreciate British culture as well as purely Chinese culture.
Well, we all like fish and chips and we like to play football, which is quite nice. And Gerry, maybe we would like to have a little bit discussion about the Chinese economy, especially when our Premier Li Keqiang recently gave a speech at the World Economic Forum took place in Dalian. And, because before that there has been some discussion among economists and, sector experts around the world about the slowdown of Chinese economy. And some people start to say, will China, have some major problems in terms of the hard landing, etc., etc. So what's your opinion about, the issues other people have been a little bit concerned?
Well, first of all, I thought that it was the most tremendous speech. I have read the speech very, very carefully, and I think it is one of the major economic speeches of the last 10 years. I think it has been extremely well put together. I could see the expertise within it of the people who had written it, and I think it sets out a program of innovation and reform which is very far-reaching. It echoes very much a conversation that I had with President Xi Jinping when I was in Boao in April. So I think a very consistent message is coming out of the Chinese leadership. I think it's a very brave message. They are talking about reform, they are talking about transformation, a level playing field between different parts of the Chinese business world, opportunities for small companies, medium companies, opportunities for entrepreneurs, a commitment to carrying on opening up China, but also it's full of words like innovation, environment, broadband. This could have been a speech which a very, very progressive Western leader had made. And I think it's great that to be able to see a speech like this made in the Chinese context. And for the speech to recognize what China has to do, It quite properly refers both to the strength of China and to the fact there's parts of China which are still developing. It pays great attention to the balances that are necessary within China. It speaks very strongly of the benefits to China of the continued opening up to the world. And I think this is a very, very important message. People forget the sophistication of Chinese policymakers. And the nature of the Chinese economy at the moment is that Chinese policymakers have much more authority than policymakers in the West do. Chinese policymakers control many levers when it comes to making things work within China. And it was absolutely clear to me over the last 6 months that they have decided that a sustainable growth plan in China is around 7%, 7.5%, which are remarkably good figures. Other countries in the world would give everything to be on a stable growth plan as that. I came back from India yesterday. India growth is slipping down to 4%, 5%. Indians would give anything to have this sort of growth plan. So the market sometimes looks at these things too simply. And the fact that the Chinese government can now have the mechanisms, the levers, which allow them to keep the Chinese economy perhaps growing in a rather narrow corridor. Now, none of us quite know the size of that corridor, but if that corridor is somewhere, say, between 7% and 7.5%, this is a fantastic corridor going forward. And I thought that the speech, if you read it very carefully, and if I went through it underlining the words that I thought were important, and I came to the conclusion this is a very, very far-reaching, radical statement of economic policies, which are the equal of anywhere else in the world, but which Premier Li has set so firmly within the Chinese context.
That's really interesting. And you probably noticed, in his, speech, he has very specifically mentioned a few key points, especially about the, proposed Shanghai Free Trade Zone, which also seems to generate a lot of discussion, probably since he take his, office back to March. So what's your, understanding about the proposed free trade zone?
None of us know sufficient details of it yet to be certain of what it means. And in due course it will be those details that are the most important thing. We can all see how successful places like Shenzhen have been. And if you go back to Deng Xiaoping's trip to the south, back when that was, 1990, long time ago, how successful that was at stimulating economic growth. I'm not entirely clear yet how financial services will operate within this zone. It's very easy to have free trade zones for manufacturing sector. You bring goods in from outside, you add value to them, and you export them again. My business in China, for example, we don't need a free trade zone. We operate in 75 cities. We are selling products to Chinese companies. It's not entirely clear to me how that will benefit my company. But certainly anything which can give rise to progressive liberalization, progressive transformation, gradually over a period of time, making the renminbi more convertible. All this is very much to be welcomed. I confidently expect that within the next 10 years, London will be one of the great global centres for trading renminbi offshore. And I think that will be done through the cooperation with the Chinese authorities. I expect the great banks like ICBC, BOC to be playing a very important part of that here. And in the end, I'd much rather see this liberalisation happening everywhere. Not in something which is just defined by a fence within a free trade zone. Sometimes you have to start these processes by having pilot studies, by having experiments. I encourage my Chinese friends to be self-confident. China knows a lot about these matters. China always knew a lot, and it has learned even more in the last 10 years. So I encourage my Chinese friends to be ambitious in their development. And of course, I have to say that as a company headquartered in Tianjin, I'm equally interested in free trade and economic prosperity in the other big cities such as Tianjin, Chengdu, the other very important centres within China. So I lived in Shanghai for many, many years. I still have an apartment overlooking the park, the Fuxing Park in Shanghai. So I like Shanghai very much. I think Shanghai is one of the world's great cities, but I want to see the benefit of free trade, economic liberalization eventually touch the whole of China. But if we have to do this through an experimental route, that is very good. But I need to wait and see. I can see the fine details before giving you my final opinion on this.
Of course, because I mean there has been lots of discussion basically saying the financial sector probably will be the main sector that will benefit tremendously from the proposed Shanghai Free Trade Zone. But I mean obviously, as you have already mentioned, the final details is still under discussion. Although I mean the leader will probably officially launch it at the end of this month, but I mean all the very details things probably will have to evolve over time, and there might be some part of the legislation about foreign investment need to be amended or upgraded to cater to this quite unique pilot in Shanghai.
Yes, I'm sure it will be successful.
Yeah.
But it's very important always to remember that the financial sector is part of the whole economy.
Of course.
And the financial sector does not operate best if it is in a ghetto with a wall around it, separated from the rest of the economy. The financial sector and the real economy have to work very closely together. So I hope that if this financial zone develops in the way we expect, the things that are learnt in that zone spread out over China to the benefit of Chinese people and to the benefit of global trade generally. But anything which advances this, I'm very happy to. But coming back to Premier Lee's speech, his references to a mixed economy, I quote, "China's modernization will not be accomplished without reform, nor will it be achieved without opening up." He goes on to talk about the importance of international affairs.
Sure.
As its economy expands, China will play an increasingly bigger role in international affairs. I welcome that. And of course we have to remember the figures. China is expected to import 10 trillion US dollars of goods, invest 500 billion US dollars overseas, and send over 400 million tourists abroad. Think of all the handbags they will buy in London when these tourists come to London going forward.
That's probably one of the reasons latest I saw a news report about the boss of the Bond Street, that's where all the luxury brand located.
Yes.
Is actually going to bring a delegation to China to try to, persuade Chinese tourists to continue to come to London to shop, to try to, experience this kind of London culture.
Yes, and of course this is why so many Chinese people are coming down, why so many Chinese businesses, a lot of Chinese businesses interested now in acquiring property, building Chinese office centres, Chinese malls. I absolutely expect over the 10 years that London will become itself more and more Chinese.
So do you think that's probably in the same way like Li Ka-shing have did, because he purchased a lot of UK infrastructure projects on water, on electricity, on gas?
Yes, my Chinese friends are some of the cleverest, most savvy, most professional investors in the world. That is what globalization means. And perhaps more than any other city in the world, London needs globalization. London requires globalization. I live right in the centre of London. I don't think there's another English person lives in my street. Wonderful mix of people from around the world, and I love that. That is what it means living in London, living in a global financial capital.
Based on your points, another thing lots of Chinese audience will be quite interested is, London as the offshore center to host the internationalization of the Chinese currency RMB. And we all know we have recently seen the quite, big agreement between Bank of China and Bank of England signing the agreement for the swap of currency. And so what do you think will be the next step to further, establish London as the main offshore center for Chinese currency?
I think the next step will be the major Chinese banks expanding their operations in London. I've already seen that beginning to happen. I won't say who, but a president of a very important Chinese bank said to me, only fools go to Luxembourg. And I think that London will be the hub, but this will be driven as much by Chinese banks as by other banks. And we welcome that. We're not here, in my role as chairman of the city, I'm not here to promote British banks. I'm here to promote banks operating in Britain for the benefit of the world. And if some of those banks are Chinese banks, I'm as much trying to promote their business as I am everybody else. And I look forward to that.
That's really great. And my last question you probably heard about is, our new president, Xi Jinping, who you met recently at the BIO events in April, came up with the brilliant idea about Chinese dream.
Yes.
And throughout China, we have a really big, discussion about what Chinese dream really means to individual people, and also how it could be applied to, foreign friends like you who has been to China many times and know our country inside and out. So what does Chinese dream means to you as a, prominent UK financial leader?
The only reason I don't like the word dream is that sometimes when you wake up, dreams don't happen. I think the Chinese dream is much more firmly established, such as that. And I think the Chinese dream and the Chinese reality is that China is returning to its position as one of the world's great nations. It is participating much more in the world. It is becoming a very powerful partner in international development organizations. This is spreading prosperity throughout China. This is helping the imbalances between the town and the countryside, the coastal areas and the West. I think all that is right. So my version of the Chinese dream is that the Chinese people have prosperity. They are international in their outlook. They are a peaceful people, and they are absolutely part of the world. And it is getting all our nations to work together in the world for their mutual prosperity. I suppose that's my dream, and I think that easily falls into the Chinese dream as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Gerry. And do you have any words to say to our audience, from People's Daily Online?
I think I would just say to them, come to London.
Come to London.
Come to visit London.
Yeah.
Think about studying here. Think about coming on holiday here.
Yeah.
And certainly if you're a business person,
Yeah.
think about doing business here.
Thank you so much. It's really great to have you here with us.
I very much enjoyed the interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.